Sub-Commander Yethris ran the scan again. The same result. The same impossible result. He pressed his 4 fingers against his temples and breathed slowly. Border Station Ascending Truth had been his assignment for 3 years. 3 years of nothing. Ships came. Ships went. Traders. Diplomats. The occasional smuggler stupid enough to cross Dominion space without papers. Nothing like this. The mass signature on his screen showed a vessel the size of a small moon. Its energy output burned so bright that the sensors kept trying to classify it as a star. But stars did not move at faster-than-light speeds. Stars did not cross sacred borders without permission. Stars did not broadcast a single word in 4,000 languages. Margaret. Yethris checked his translation software. The word meant nothing in Dominion language. He ran it through the cultural database. A human name. Female. Common among their species 300 years ago. Humans. He almost laughed. The file on humanity was one of the shortest in Dominion records. A young species, aggressive but primitive. They had been discovered 3 centuries ago, still burning dead plants for energy, still fighting wars over invisible lines on their single planet. The Dominion had placed quarantine buoys around their system and moved on. Some species were not worth the trouble of conquest. Yethris pulled up the old human file and compared it to the ship on his sensors. The file showed chemical rockets, fragile tin cans that could barely reach their own moon. His sensors showed something else entirely. The vessel's hull was made of materials that did not exist in Dominion science. Its engines bent space in ways that should have torn the ship apart. Its shields registered as a solid wall of force that his instruments could not measure. Humans were primitives. Everyone knew this. Yethris ran the scan a 4th time. Same result. He opened a channel to a superior officer. Commander Vailth appeared on his screen, looking annoyed. She had been eating dinner. Sub-Commander, this had better be important. Commander, we have an unknown vessel crossing the border. Massive energy signature. No response to hails. I believe it may be human. Vailth stared at him. Then she laughed. Human? Yethris, have you been drinking? No, Commander. I have run the scan 4 times. The vessel's transponder is broadcasting a human word. I request permission to show me. Yethris transferred his sensor data to her screen. He watched her face change. The amusement drained away. Her skin paled from deep blue to almost white. That cannot be correct, she said. I have verified. Run it again. Vailth's mandibles clicked together in the nervous pattern that meant real fear. I am alerting High Command, she said. Do not take any action. Do not attempt contact. Just watch it. The channel closed. Yethris watched. The human ship moved through Dominion space like it owned the territory. It did not slow down. It did not change course. It did not respond to the automated warning signals that screamed at it in 100 languages to stop and identify itself. It just kept going. Deeper. Faster. Yethris zoomed his visual sensors on the hull. The image was grainy at this distance, but he could make out details that made no sense. The ship was covered in marks. At first, he thought it was damage, battle scars from some unknown war. But the marks were too regular, too deliberate. They were names. Thousands of names, carved into the hull of a ship that should not exist. Human names, cut deep into metal that Dominion science said could not be cut. Some of the carvings looked old, worn by time and radiation. Others looked fresh. Yethris felt something cold move through his chest. He had seen warships before. He had seen destroyers and carriers and dreadnoughts built for conquest. This was something different. This was a memorial that could kill. The human ship passed within scanning range of Ascending Truth, close enough to rattle the station's hull with the wake of its passage, close enough for Yethris to read one of the names carved near the bow. James Chen, 2847 to to 2891. He never stopped believing. Below it, another name. Sarah Chen, 2869 to 2934. She taught her children the mission. And another, David Chen, 2901 to 2962. He built the engines that would take us there. All Chen, all the same family name, generations of them, carved into the hull of a ship that had traveled who knew how far, for who knew how long, looking for someone named Margaret. The ship did not slow, it did not turn. It passed ascending truth like the station was not even there, and continued into the heart of Dominion space. Yethris received the notification 30 minutes later. High Command had authorized a military response. The Third Fleet was being activated. 42 warships would intercept the human vessel and demand its surrender. 42 ships against one. Standard overwhelming response. The Dominion did not believe in fair fights. The Dominion believed in making examples. Yethris looked at his sensors one more time. The human ship was already a bright dot, disappearing into the distance. Still broadcasting that single word in 4,000 languages. Margaret. He thought about the names on the hull. He thought about the family called Chen. He thought about what kind of species would carve their dead into their warship and fly it across the galaxy looking for someone. He thought about the old file that called humans primitive. For the first time in his career, Yethris wondered if the Dominion had made a mistake. The Third Fleet would arrive in 6 hours. 42 ships with enough firepower to crack a planet. The human vessel would be stopped. It would be boarded. Its crew would be captured and questioned, and probably executed for violating Dominion space. This was certain. This was how things worked. But Yethris could not stop looking at his sensors. He could not stop thinking about those names. He could not stop wondering what kind of promise could make a species build a ship like that. And he could not stop the small, cold feeling in his chest that whispered something was very wrong. The human ship did not slow down. It never did. Fleet Admiral Corveth had studied the human files years ago. He found them amusing, a species ruled by emotion, a species that formed bonds so strong they would die for complete strangers, a species that called this weakness love and considered it their greatest strength. Corveth had laughed at that. Love was not strength. Love was a chain. It made you predictable. It made you weak. Now he stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched a human warship ignore his entire fleet. 42 vessels surrounded the human ship. Destroyers, cruisers, his own dreadnought, the Eternal Dominion, with enough weapons to glass a continent. They formed a perfect sphere of death around the intruder. The human ship did not stop. Broadcast again, Corveth ordered. His communications officer obeyed. The message went out in every language the Dominion knew, including the crude sounds that humans used for speech. Unknown vessel, you have violated Dominion space. Stop your engines and prepare to be boarded. This is your final warning. Silence. The human ship kept moving. It pushed through the fleet's formation like the warships were not even there. Its shields brushed against a destroyer's hull and knocked the smaller ships spinning. Corveth felt his anger rising. No one ignored the Dominion. No one. Warning shot, he commanded. Across their bow. Show them we are serious. The Eternal Dominion's main cannon fired. A beam of pure energy screamed across space, bright enough to blind sensors, hot enough to melt steel. It should have passed in front of the human ship, a demonstration of power, a final chance to surrender. The human ship turned into the beam. Corveth's crew gasped. The vessel had deliberately taken the shot, a direct hit to the forward hull, enough energy to destroy a small moon. The human ship's shields flared white. Then, nothing. It kept moving. Damage report on the target, Corveth demanded. None detected, Admiral. Their shields absorbed the entire blast. Corvette stared at the view screen. His flagship's main weapon had done nothing, not even slowed them down. The human ship broadcast a new word, a single word in 4,000 languages. Where? Admiral, his intelligence officer approached with a data tablet. I have found something in the archives. You need to see this. Corvette took the tablet. He read the file. Then he read it again. 200 years ago, a Dominion science vessel had visited the outer edges of human space. The humans were still primitive then, still bound to their home system, easy targets. The science vessel had taken samples, 12 human specimens, removed from a small colony on the edge of their territory, brought back to Dominion space for study. The project was called Species Assessment Initiative. The goal was to determine if humans had any useful biological traits worth harvesting. The project ran for 20 years before being declared unproductive. The specimens were disposed of. The files were archived. Corvette looked at the list of specimens. 12 names, 12 humans taken from their homes and brought to a place they could never escape. One name caught his eye. Margaret Chen, female, age at acquisition, 7 years old. Corvette looked up at the view screen. The human ship was still moving, still broadcasting. Margaret, where? He understood now. This was not an invasion. This was not a military action. This was not a declaration of war. This was a family looking for their lost child. 200 years later, across impossible distances, through space that should have been unreachable. They had come looking for a 7-year-old girl who had been taken from her home before their species had even reached the stars. They had not stopped. They had not forgotten. Corvette thought about the old files. Aggressive pack bonding, irrational attachment to individuals, emotional reasoning masquerading as strategy. He had laughed at those words once. He was not laughing now. Admiral, his weapons officer waited for orders. Should we fire again? Corvette hesitated. A strange feeling moved through him, something he had not felt in decades of military service. Doubt. The human ship was not attacking. It was searching. It had crossed the galaxy for 2 centuries looking for one person. It had taken a direct hit from his flagship and kept going. Not because it wanted war, because it wanted answers. For one moment, Corvette considered letting them pass. Then he remembered who he was. The Dominion did not show mercy. The Dominion did not ask questions. The Dominion crushed anything that challenged its authority. All ships, he commanded. Full barrage. Destroy that vessel. 42 warships opened fire at once. The space around the human ship turned white with energy. Beams and missiles and plasma charges slammed into its shields from every direction. Enough firepower to destroy a fleet. Enough heat to melt a planet's crust. The human ship vanished inside the storm. Corvette watched, waited. His crew held their breath. The light faded. The human ship emerged from the fire. Its shields were flickering now, damaged but not broken. Its hull showed scorch marks between the carved names of the dead. It did not fire back. It did not turn. It did not run. It kept going. And it broadcast one more word. Where? Corvette felt something cold settle in his stomach. His entire fleet had just thrown everything they had at a single ship. They had heard it. They had not stopped it. And it still was not fighting back. Admiral, his intelligence officer's voice shook. I have tracked the specimen Margaret Chen through the archives. I know where she was taken. Where? Corvette demanded. A processing facility on the moon Veth Car. She was recycled there, 60 years after acquisition. The facility has been decommissioned for over a century. Recycled, a clean word for an ugly truth. Corvette looked at the human ship pushing through his fleet's formation. It was heading deeper into Dominion space, toward the core systems, toward Veth Car. They are going to find her, he said quietly. After all this time, they are going to find her. His weapons officer waited for new orders. Attack again? Retreat. Something. Corveth gave no orders. He just watched the human ship burn through the darkness, still searching, still calling out that name in 4,000 languages. Margaret. 200 years. That was how long humans could hold on to love. Corveth had called that a weakness once. He was not sure what to call it now. Archivist Sulen had not spoken to another living person in 16 days. This was normal. The biological acquisition archives were located deep beneath the capital city, in tunnels that had been old when the Dominion was young. No one visited. No one cared about files that had been sealed for decades. Sulen preferred it this way. She had spent 40 years in the darkness, organizing records of experiments that most citizens did not know existed. She did not judge. She did not question. She simply filed. When the summons came, she assumed it was a mistake. She was wrong. "We need you to find a file," the military officer said. He looked uncomfortable in the archives. Too many shadows, too much dust, too much history that no one wanted to remember. A human specimen, taken approximately 200 years ago. Name, Margaret Chen. Sulen's fingers moved across her console. The archives held millions of records, species from across the galaxy, collected and studied and discarded. Finding one human among them should have been difficult. It was not. Margaret Chen's file was flagged. Someone had been searching for it recently. Military intelligence, probably, trying to understand the ship that had invaded their space. Sulen pulled up the record and began to read. Margaret Chen, human female, acquired from Colony 7 in the Outer Sol system. Age at acquisition, 7 standard years. Physical condition, healthy. Mental condition, distressed. The early notes were clinical. Test results, biological samples, measurements of bone density and neural activity. The scientists had been thorough. Then the notes changed. Subject displays unusual attachment behavior. Frequently asks for mom. Refuses to cooperate with testing, unless comforted. Requires significant resources to maintain psychological stability. Sulen kept reading. Subject has been transferred to labor division. Physical capabilities deemed sufficient for light industrial work. Mental distress ongoing, but manageable with sedation. 20 years of labor records followed. Margaret Chen had been moved from facility to facility. Mining operations, manufacturing plants, agricultural stations. Always working, always watched, always documented. The notes mentioned her questions. She asked about her home. She asked about her family. She asked if anyone was looking for her. She was told no. Sulen found the final entry. Subject Margaret Chen. Age at termination, 34 standard years. Cause, system failure due to accumulated labor stress. Remains processed at Vethkar Recycling Facility. No biological value recovered. File closed. Recycled. Sulen had read thousands of files like this. Specimens taken, used, discarded. It was the way of things. The Dominion needed resources. Some species became resources. But something about this file felt different. She pulled up the human ship's sensor data. The military had been tracking it for days now. It had fought through the Third Fleet. It had taken damage that should have destroyed it 10 times over. It was still moving toward Vethkar. Sulen looked at the ship's energy signature. She looked at its estimated age. 40 years. The ship had been traveling for 40 years. She searched deeper, found reports from human space, intelligence gathered before the quarantine buoys went up, before the Dominion stopped watching. The humans had launched this ship 40 years ago. They had aimed it at Dominion space with one mission: find the 12 specimens taken 2 centuries before. The crew that had launched it was dead now. Old age, natural causes, but their children had taken their place. and their grandchildren after that. 3 generations had lived and died on that ship. Born in the darkness between stars, raised knowing only one purpose: find Margaret, find the others, bring them home. Sulen looked at Margaret Chen's file again. Subject frequently asks for mom. She had asked for her mother. For 27 years she had asked. No one had come. No one had answered. But someone had been coming. They just had not arrived in time. Sulen felt something she had not felt in 40 years of working in these archives. Something that made her hands shake and her eyes burn. She felt ashamed. The Dominion had taken a child. The Dominion had worked her until she died. The Dominion had ground her bones into fertilizer and filed the paperwork. And her family had built a warship and chased her across the galaxy for 200 years. They had not forgotten. They had not given up. Even when the people who launched the mission died, even when their children died, even when all hope should have been lost, they were still coming. Sulen made a decision. Her console had access to the military communication network. Read-only access, technically. But she had worked in these archives for 4 decades. She knew how to send a message when she needed to. She found the human ship's communication frequency, the one it used to broadcast that single word, Margaret. She typed a message, short, simple, everything the humans needed to know. Margaret Chen, Veth Kar, Plot 1447. She sent it. Treason, that was what they would call it. She had given military intelligence to an enemy vessel. She had betrayed the Dominion. Sulen did not care. She watched her console, waited. The human ship's course had been steady for days, pushing toward the core systems, searching blindly. The ship changed direction. It turned toward Veth Kar, direct course, maximum speed, no more searching, no more guessing. It knew where to go now. Sulen leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. Security would come for her eventually. They would trace the message. They would drag her from her archives and execute her for treason. She thought about Margaret Chen, 7 years old, ripped from her home, asking for her mother for 27 years, while no one answered. She thought about the ship full of humans who had spent 2 centuries trying to answer. Sulen had filed thousands of records in these archives. Species taken, species used, species forgotten. But humans did not forget. Humans measured love in generations. Sulen smiled in the darkness of her archives and waited for security to come. She had done one good thing in 40 years. That was enough. Captain Yara Chen had never seen a sunrise. She was born on the Promise. So was her mother. So was her grandmother. 4 generations of the Chen family had lived and died inside this ship, traveling through the darkness between stars, chasing a ghost named Margaret. Yara knew Margaret's face better than her own. Holographic images covered the walls of her quarters. A 7-year-old girl with dark hair and bright eyes, laughing, playing, alive. That girl had been dead for over a century. Yara knew this. Everyone on the ship knew this. But they kept going anyway. Because a promise was a promise. The ship shuddered around her. Another hit. The Dominion had been throwing everything they had at the Promise for 3 days. Cruisers, destroyers, orbital defense platforms. The shields were failing. The engines were burning too hot. The hull was cracked in 17 places. They were almost there. Report, Yara commanded. Shields at 4%. Engines at 60%. Hull breach on decks 7 through 9. We have sealed those sections. Her first officer's voice was steady. Lieutenant Commander James Chen, her cousin. He had been born 3 compartments down from her quarters. They had learned to walk on the same deck plates. Casualty report. 47 dead, 112 wounded. 47. Yara felt each number like a wound. She knew every person on this ship. She had grown up with them, played with them, learned with them. They were not crew, they were family. And they were dying. For Margaret. For a woman none of them had ever met. Time to Vethkar? 20 minutes. 20 minutes. After 40 years of travel. After 200 years of searching. After generations of sacrifice. 20 minutes. Push the engines harder, Yara ordered. Captain, the engines are all ready. Harder. The ship groaned. Metal screamed against metal. Warning lights flashed across every console. But the Promise accelerated, pushing through the Dominion fleet like a burning spear. They would not stop. They had never stopped. The moon appeared on their view screen. Vethkar, a dead rock orbiting a dying star. No atmosphere, no life, nothing but dust and abandoned facilities. And graves, thousands of graves. The Dominion fleet pulled back as the Promise entered orbit. They did not pursue. Perhaps they had finally run out of ships. Perhaps they were waiting to see what the humans would do. Yara did not care. I am going down, she said, alone. Captain, the ship needs everyone at their stations. If the Dominion attacks again, you need to get out of here. Get back to human space. Tell them what we found. James stared at her. They had known each other their entire lives. They had trained for this moment since they were children. But training was different from reality. You might not make it back up, he said quietly. I know. She took a shuttle down to the surface. The landing was rough. The shuttle's systems were damaged, barely functional. But it touched ground in one piece, and that was enough. Yara stepped out onto Vethkar. The cold hit her immediately. Her suit's heating system was failing. She had maybe an hour before hypothermia set in. Maybe less. She did not have time to search. She did not need to. The message they had received gave her coordinates. Plot 1447. Someone inside the Dominion had told them exactly where to go. Yara walked across the frozen ground. Her boots crunched on soil that had not been disturbed in over a century. The abandoned facility loomed in the distance. Dark windows, collapsed roofs, a place where people had been brought to die. She found the graves behind the main building. Rows upon rows of markers stretched across the frozen landscape. Thousands of them, each one marked with a number, no names. The Dominion had not bothered to record names, but Yara knew which number she was looking for. She found it near the edge of the field, a small marker, half buried in frost. The number was barely visible, worn away by 2 centuries of wind and ice. Yara knelt. Her suit's heating system failed. The cold began seeping through the layers, into her skin, into her bones. She did not move. We found you, she said. Her voice cracked. We finally found you. Margaret Chen, age at acquisition, 7. Taken from her home, brought to this place, worked until she broke, buried in a field of numbers. She had died asking for her mother. She had died believing no one was coming. But someone had been coming. Her family had been coming. For 200 years, the Chen family had been reaching across the stars, trying to bring her home. Yara pulled off her glove. The cold burned her skin immediately. She pressed her bare hand against the frozen soil. I never met you, she whispered. My grandmother never met you. But we know your face. We know your voice. We have recordings, stories, everything they could save before you were taken. Tears froze on her cheeks. You were 7 years old. You were scared. You wanted your mom, and we could not save you. We tried so hard, but we were too slow. We were too far away. We did not have the technology. We did not have the ships. She looked up at the sky. Somewhere up there, the Promise was waiting. A ship full of her family. A ship covered in names. But we never forgot you. We never stopped coming. And now we are here. We are going to take you home. She stayed there until her suit began to fail completely. until the cold became pain, became numbness, until she could barely move her fingers. Then she stood up. She pulled a small device from her belt, a marker. She pressed it into the ground beside the Dominion's numbered stake. The marker lit up, blue light in the darkness, and on its surface words began to form. Margaret Chen, beloved daughter, never forgotten. Yara activated her communicator. James, I found her. Prepare the cargo bay. We are taking her home. She began to dig. The Promise stayed in orbit while Yara worked. The Dominion fleet watched from a distance. No one moved. They all just watched the human captain dig through frozen soil with her bare hands, pulling a dead woman from a numbered grave, bringing her back to a ship covered in the names of everyone who had died looking for her. 6 hours later, Yara carried a small container back to her shuttle. Inside were the remains of Margaret Chen. 200 years after she was taken, 40 years after her family launched a ship to find her. Generations after everyone who had known her died. High Sovereign Maleth had ruled the Dominion for 300 years. He had conquered 12 star systems. He had crushed rebellions that threatened to tear his empire apart. He had ordered the deaths of millions without hesitation. His name was spoken with fear across 1,000 worlds. None of that mattered now. He stood in his throne room, surrounded by advisors and generals and ministers, and watched a single human ship limp away from Vethkar. The Promise was dying. Anyone could see that. Its shields were gone, its weapons were destroyed, its hull was cracked in bleeding atmosphere into the void. More than half its crew was dead. It was still moving. Destroy it, General Kethros demanded. We have 100 ships in range. One order and it is finished. Maleth did not respond. High Sovereign, they violated our space. They killed our soldiers. They made us look weak. We must respond with force. Maleth turned from the view screen and looked at his general. Kethros was old, experienced. He had served the Dominion his entire life and had never questioned an order. He did not understand. Tell me about the ship, Maleth said quietly. Kethros blinked. High Sovereign? The human ship. Tell me about it. It is a warship, approximately 40 years old based on our analysis. Crew complement of several hundred, though exact numbers are unknown. It crossed our borders 6 days ago, and... No, Maleth shook his head. Tell me about the ship. He pulled up the sensor data on the main display. The Promise filled the screen. Burned, broken, barely alive, and covered in names. 40 years ago, Maleth said, the humans launched this vessel. Their species had just barely achieved faster-than-light travel. They had no experience with interstellar warfare. They had never left their own system in meaningful numbers. He zoomed in on the hull. Names scrolled past, thousands of them, carved into metal that should have been impossible to carve. They knew this mission would take longer than any human lifespan. They knew the crew that launched it would never return. So they built a ship that could sustain generations. They raised children in the darkness between stars. They taught those children the mission. And when those children grew old and died, their children continued. The room was silent. 3 generations. Maleth let that number hang in the air. 3 generations of humans lived and died on that ship. They were born knowing they would never see home. They were raised knowing they would probably never find what they were looking for. And they kept going anyway. He turned to face his advisors. For one person, one human female, taken 200 years ago. A child who died in our custody over a century before this ship launched. They built a multi-generational mission to find her remains and bring her home. General Kethros shifted uncomfortably. High Sovereign, surely this is irrational. They spent 2 centuries and countless lives to recover bones. The strategic value is nothing. The resource expenditure is insane. It makes no sense. No, Maleth agreed. It does not. He pulled up the old human files. The assessments made 3 centuries ago when the Dominion first discovered humanity. He read the words aloud. Aggressive pack bonding, irrational attachment to individuals, emotional reasoning masquerading as strategy. He closed the file. We wrote those words as criticism. We saw their attachments as a weakness to be exploited. We thought their love made them predictable. He looked at the promise on the view screen. Still moving, still bleeding, still refusing to die. We were wrong. High Sovereign, we took 1 child, and they sent a ship crewed by her family's descendants for 2 centuries. They did not stop when we ignored them. They did not stop when we attacked them. They did not stop when we killed them. Maleth walked to the center of the throne room. His voice echoed off the ancient walls. We have faced many enemies, the Vorthon Collective, the machine minds of Sector 7, the hive swarms of the Outer Rim. All of them fought for resources, territory, survival. We understood them. We could calculate their responses. We could predict their limits. He pointed at the human ship. Humans do not have limits. Not when they are fighting for each other. That ship's crew died knowing they would never reach their destination, and they were proud to die. Their children took their place and felt honored to continue. Their grandchildren finished the mission and considered it the greatest achievement of their lives. He turned to his general. What happens when we take 2? Kethros had no answer. What happens when we take 10, 100, 1,000? What happens when humanity decides the Dominion is a threat to their families? Maleth looked around the room. His advisors were silent. His generals were pale. For the first time in centuries, they were afraid. They will come for us, Maleth said. Not for conquest, not for resources, for revenge. And they will not stop. They will build ships that last generations. They will teach their children to hate us. They will chase us across the galaxy for as long as it takes, because that is what humans do when you hurt the people they love. He issued his order. Stand down. All ships, let them go. The room erupted in protest. General Kethros stepped forward, his face dark with anger. High Sovereign, this is weakness. The Dominion does not. The Dominion survives, Maleth interrupted. That is all the Dominion does, and we will not survive a war with a species that measures love in centuries. The protests died. Maleth watched the view screen as the Promise crossed back into neutral space. Its hull was barely holding together. Its engines were failing. It would be a miracle if it reached human territory. But it would reach human territory. He was certain of that. Because humans did not give up. The ship disappeared from sensors. Gone. Headed home with the bones of a woman dead for over a century. Maleth turned away from the screen. Close the border, he ordered. Permanently. No Dominion vessel enters human space. No human vessel is interfered with. We do not contact them. We do not provoke them. We do not give them any reason to come back. He walked toward his private chambers. And find the files on those 12 specimens. I want to know where every single one of them was buried. We are going to send that information to the humans ourselves. Kethros stared at him. High Sovereign, why? Maleth paused at the door. Because there are 11 more ships coming, and I would rather they find what they are looking for than spend another 2 centuries getting angry. He left the throne room. Behind him, on the view screen, the last sensor echo of the Promise faded into the darkness.